What happens when a portal to the other side is blocked? Today, in episode 21 of My True Ghost Stories, I'm going to tell you the story of another church in my neighborhood with a supernatural issue. There was a period of time several years ago when I was disenchanted with my church, the one I've talked about in other episodes. You know, it happens. Being disenchanted with your church, my church-going listeners can probably relate. I won't give details about why I was disenchanted, but, stuff going on that I didn't like. So I went to this different church in the neighborhood for a while. Smaller, more intimate. It looked like a small-town church, and the congregation had that small-town vibe, friendly, a little nosy and judgmental, but at first, very appealing. The beautiful church building was on a large corner lot with a big green lawn and a huge evergreen tree, the type that Rockefeller Center might eye for its Christmas tree. It had a beautiful manicured garden, and on this relatively big lot, big for New York City, the church had a rectory where the minister lived, and this house had the opposite vibe from the church building. It was run down, it was shabby, had a sagging porch, stained siding. It was a mess. And there was a rumor in the neighborhood that this house was haunted. It sure looked it. And I already knew that. Just walking past it over the years, I had encountered 2 unhappy ghosts on the front porch trying to get my attention. I had helped one of them ascend, but the other had gone back into the house. The haunting would sometimes extend from the house to the church building. There were groups that met in the basement of the church, and a friend told me that while down there one day, her 4-year-old daughter was pointing to an empty corner saying, "The man is angry. The man is angry." Pretty spooky. Previous ministers who had lived in the rectory had talked about things moving, irritating energy, cold spots, haunted house stuff. So this church, where I attended for a while, had 2 ministers, and they had this wonderful custom of taking new members out for coffee to get to know them, something my old church would never do. And when they asked me to go out for coffee, I eagerly accepted, seeing an opportunity to get into this new community. I was very excited. I thought this was great. We met in a restaurant that was across the street from the church. We settled in, we ordered, and they started asking me about myself, which I really liked. The opportunity to get to talk about myself, which would never happen in my old church. Side note, this new church, I slowly learned during my time there, wound up having all sorts of problems too, which is why I eventually wound up back at my original church. Anyway, we talked about the neighborhood, the former ministers. It got slightly gossipy, but not too much. They were good ministers. We talked about faith, but not as much as you'd think in a conversation with 2 ministers. And I asked them if either of them lived in the house, the rectory, not mentioning the haunted part. And one of them did. She lived there with her family, and the other one lived across town. "And how is that?" I asked, waiting to hear if there was any haunted house action. And she said, "Interesting," with a strange look on her face and a side glance at her co-minister. I decided to go further with trying to find out if they knew about the ghosts. So I casually said, "Yeah, I think that porch is haunted." And they wanted to know, "Why do you think that?" And I told them, a little hesitantly, I didn't know if they would believe in this type of thing, but I went ahead and I said, "Well, I'm a medium." And their faces lit up. And so I thought, well, thank goodness. So they're cool with this. So I decided to go on. I told them, well, I feel the presence of ghosts on the porch when I walk by. And I was refraining from telling them that the whole house was haunted in case they didn't know. I didn't want to scare her, the one who lives there. But then she said, well, it's not just the porch. I said, I know. I was trying not to scare you in case you didn't know. Oh, I know the whole house is haunted. So happily for me, they completely believed this, and we started to discuss details. It was the same stuff as previous occupants had described, cold spots, strange noises, but mostly just a spooky feeling there. And as we were talking, I got a quick vision, a vision of something wrong in the top floor of the house. And I said to them, there's some weird object in the attic, right? And they exchanged glances again. Yes, they told me there was a strange object in the attic, and I won't give exact details, but they told me it was a homemade religious icon that had key details wrong. Very, very wrong. And this weird religious icon is like a statue, and it was there when she moved in, and who knows why it was there, but it was very old, she said, and maybe it was a gift to a former minister who saw its wrongness and just put it up in the attic. They didn't know. But as they were describing this to me, I started getting lots of messages, visions and messages, and I asked them if they wanted to hear the messages, and they said yes. I got in the zone a little bit right there, right in front of them, this trance-like state when I'm getting messages. And I looked down and I started talking about the messages I was receiving. And I said, there's a portal in that house. The religious statue and its wrongness is completely blocking the portal. So the house is full of trapped spirits who are headed for the portal, but they can't get through. And you have to remove the statue. When I finished being in the zone and delivering the messages, I looked up and they were staring at me. Not like I was weird, but that the whole thing was weird. But after a moment, the minister who lived in the house said, okay, what do I do? I think the situation in the house was probably pretty unbearable, so she was eager to take action. She said that she had been hesitant to remove the statue because she didn't know exactly how to do it, but she said there was an official, respectful method for the discarding of a religious icon, and she would look it up. And then I asked them, would you like me to come and clear the house of all the spirits? I can do that. And there was an emphatic yes. I was so pleased, because I love doing this stuff. We finished our coffee. The ministers agreed with each other that this was the most productive new member coffee date they had ever had. And the minister who lived in the house asked if I could come by the house, which was right across the street, quickly right then, just to assess the situation. And I had time, so I did. Just walking through the front door, after crossing that haunted porch, I could feel the uncomfortable energy. It was heavy, and it hit you in the face right as you walked in the door. And the energy was like a crowded train station full of frustrated, waiting passengers. Like sometimes here in New York City, when you head down the steps at the train station and there's a problem with the train, you can feel the impatience, the frustration, and the New York City style anger of the oversized crowd who have already paid their fare, standing on the platform. That was the energy in this house. The minister and I walked through. I noticed the problem areas, the ones super crowded with ghosts. And as we walked through, I noticed the resigned apathy of many of the trapped spirits there and the anger of some of the others, and it was all very unpleasant. Anger and apathy. In one room, there was a big burn stain on the floor, and she told me that that was where a former minister who had lived there had tried to perform a ritual, obviously using fire, to cleanse the house of spirits, but had only managed to almost burn the house down. Her kids' room was completely clear and had no ghosts in it, but every single other space in the house had someone in it, and all of them were in some state of unhappiness. Eventually, we reached the attic, which had an impressively small amount of stuff stored there, and there in the back was the very, very wrong icon. "Oh my," I said. "Yeah," she responded. That icon was obviously the problem. After we saw the attic and the weird icon, which was sort of like a statue, we went down to the basement where there was just one ghost. One very angry ghost, probably the one my friend's daughter had seen when she pointed to the corner and said, "The man is angry," over and over again. Going back to the train station analogy, he was like the one frustrated passenger in the train station when there's a problem with the train who was yelling. And this ghost was furious, and I could tell that he was the one causing the most disturbance to the people who were trying to live in this house. The house tour ended, and we exchanged numbers so we could get started on the clearing plan. Talking on the phone the next day, we set up a plan. She, the minister who lives in the house, would remove the icon in the manner dictated by the church's traditions. I had meditated on the whole thing after I got home from the coffee date and the tour, and I had gotten the message from my guides that after removing the icon, she had to replace the icon with items that showed upward movement. This was because even when the portal became unblocked by the removal of the weird icon statue, the trapped spirits were not going to automatically go through. It's like they had seen the blocked portal and just gone to hang out in the house. They weren't watching the portal, waiting for it to open up. They were confused and just wandering around in various states of agitation. So her part was to remove the icon and replace it with things that showed upward movement. And after she did that, I would come to the house and clear it of the many ghosts who were there. A few days later, she called and said she had performed the proper ceremony and discarded of the icon, and she had had her 8-year-old son draw 2 pictures of upward movement to put in the place of the icon. And she texted me a picture of his drawings for approval, and they were perfect. I wish I still had that picture, but that was many phones ago, and who knows where it is. But they were beautiful, colorful, perfect representations of upward movement, and would definitely encourage passage in that direction. They were like a sign that said, "Other side, this way." We set an appointment for the next week, and I prepared my plan. This was a 2-story house with an attic and a basement, so 4 stories in all, and that portal had been backed up for so long that every floor was absolutely full of ghosts, except for the kids' bedroom for some reason. I arrived the next week at our appointment time a few minutes early with my written-out plan, and the whole family greeted me, the minister, her husband, and their 2 kids. They were very excited. They all came to the door. And the parents were excited because maybe this would fix the energy problem in the house, and the kids were excited because this was so cool. I laid out the plan for the family. The kids listened, and then they were sent off to play. After a few minutes, Mom and Dad did not want them in the attic and the basement, which were not kid-friendly, so it was just me and the parents. I told them about the pattern through the house of the clearing, that I would be doing a lot of physical movement, and I told them that I will probably cry because I pick up on the energy of the trapped spirits, and they are always sad. But I told them, don't worry, it's not me crying, it's the spirits. We had to start in the attic and move down through the house. Now that the portal was open, it made sense, and it was practical to move the spirits through who were closest to it to make room so there wouldn't be like a bottleneck at the actual portal. If I started in the basement, it would get really crowded up there as we went through the floors. So it was just basic crowd control. And we began. I couldn't possibly describe to you every single spirit that I sent through as we went through the house from top to bottom. There were so many. Most of them responded quickly to the announcement that the portal was finally open, and then to my dramatic arm waving in the direction of the portal, reminding them where it was. And they were so settled into this house, and even though they were sad, they seemed to have forgotten where the portal was, so I reminded them with my arms. Around the first floor, after the attic and the second floor, I started to get tired because this was a big job, and each spirit required the dramatic arm waving in order to get them and their energy moving towards the portal. And since the parents were accompanying me all around the house, and they looked eager to help, I at one point said, "Let's all do this arm waving." So they joined me. I would tell them where the ghost was, and we would all go over. I would announce that the portal is finally open, and then we would all wave our arms. So it was easier for me, so I could wave less strenuously. We finally reached the basement, and there was the angry ghost man. And he was not just going to leave with an announcement and arm waving. He needed a conversation. And his anger was sadness. And my guess is that he had been here the longest. Maybe he was in the basement looking for another exit. So we talked, me and the angry ghost man. And I will never forget this spirit conversation. "What's going on?" I asked him. "I need to see Rita," he said in the saddest voice. And I started to cry because I was getting all his sadness, his extreme sadness. Right there, my guides said, they gave me a message. They said, "Tell him Rita is on the other side of the portal." So I said to the angry ghost, "She's there. Just go through the portal and she's there." And he didn't go right away. It was like he couldn't believe it. It was like he was stuck in this pattern of looking for an exit. And like the others, he was confused and couldn't remember where the actual exit was. "No, really, she's there. Go to her. It's this way," I said, and I started to wave my arms upward. And the parents, who had been watching me from across the room, ran over and started waving their arms too. He lingered while we waved, confused, but as had happened with the other spirits, all the waving seemed to give him the directions, and he looked around at us, confused at first, but he eventually seemed to get it, accepted the help, and he got a look of excitement on his face. And he went up. And then I felt him move through that portal, and I felt him get relief. And I cried. Eventually, I looked up at the parents, and they were looking at me. I was exhausted. And I said, "Okay, that's all of them." And I had to go. This had taken a few hours, and I had to go home and rest. I gave them some follow-up actions that they had to take about closing the portal, which takes a few days, and they wrote it all down, and I headed home. I saw the minister who lived in the house, the next week at church. And she said the difference in the energy in the house was immediately better. And with a further check and a month or two later, she said the clean, undisturbed energy had remained. So, success. I will never forget the angry man in the basement. Rita must have been his true love, and all he wanted to do was see her again. It's so romantic. And I rarely get to see what's on the other side, but I hope that Rita was there with open arms, waiting for him. And that's all for today. Thank you for listening to today's episode. And if you think your house is haunted, want energy cleared from your space, or need a custom spiritual ritual, I'm here to help. Visit jpclearing.com or email me at jpclearing60@gmail.com. Don't forget to join me here every Tuesday for a new episode. Until next time.